Marcus Chen wiped his hands on his worn jumpsuit for the 10th time. The grease stains would not come off. He had worked on starship engines for 15 years, and his hands always looked dirty. Today was different, though. Today he was flying first class. The booking computer had made a mistake. Marcus had paid for the cheapest seat on the transport ship. Instead, the system gave him Pod 7 in the luxury section. He checked his credit account 3 times. The money was still there. No extra charges. Just lucky, he thought. The starship Celestial Pride was huge. Marcus had never seen anything like it inside. Soft carpets covered the floors. The walls were painted with gold lines. Everything smelled clean and expensive. His work boots made too much noise as he walked. Other passengers stared at him. They wore fine clothes and jewelry. Marcus wore his best jumpsuit, but it still had old stains. A woman with blue skin and silver hair looked at him like he was dirty. A man in a fancy suit shook his head. Marcus found Pod 7. It was bigger than his entire workshop back home. The seat was soft leather. There was a small table and a window that showed the stars. He sat down carefully, afraid he might break something. The flight crew was getting ready to leave. Marcus could see them checking passenger lists and closing doors. Everything was going smoothly until he heard a loud voice. "This seat is too small," the voice rumbled. "I cannot fit." Marcus turned to look. Near the back of the ship, in the cheap seats, stood the biggest creature he had ever seen. It was a Draconin, one of the dragon people from the outer systems. The alien was at least 8 feet tall with thick arms and legs. His skin looked like dark green armor with old scars everywhere. The Draconin was trying to sit in a normal economy seat. His shoulders were too wide. His legs were too long. Every time he tried to sit, the seat creaked and bent. A flight attendant came over. She was a tall alien with 4 arms and a bored expression. "Sir, you need to take your assigned seat," she said in a cold voice. "I am trying," the Draconin replied. His voice was deep and tired. "But I do not fit." "That is not our problem," the attendant said. "You bought an economy ticket. These are economy seats." Marcus watched as the dragon tried again. The metal frame of the seat bent when he sat down. His knees hit the seat in front of him. His shoulders pressed against the walls on both sides. It looked painful. Other passengers were watching too. Some looked annoyed. Others seemed to think it was funny. No one offered to help. The Draconin noticed people staring. His large yellow eyes looked embarrassed. He tried to make himself smaller, but there was no way to do it. He was just too big for the seat. Marcus saw something else in those eyes. They were old eyes, full of sadness. The dragon's body was covered in scars. Some looked like burn marks. Others looked like cuts from weapons. This was not just any alien. This was a veteran, someone who had fought in the wars. The flight attendant came back with a supervisor. The supervisor was human, which made Marcus feel ashamed. "Sir, if you cannot fit in your seat, we will have to remove you from the flight," the supervisor said. "I have a ticket," the Draconin said quietly. "I paid for this seat." "Then you should have bought a first-class ticket," the supervisor replied. "We cannot change the rules for one passenger." Marcus knew that was wrong. First-class tickets cost 10 times more than economy. Most people could never afford them. Marcus could only afford his trip because he had saved money for 2 years. The dragon looked around the ship. His eyes stopped on the first-class section where Marcus sat. For a moment, their eyes met. Marcus saw something in that look. It was not anger or hate. It was just tired acceptance, like this had happened many times before. That look made Marcus angry. He had grown up on a frontier planet where different species worked together. His father had taught him that it did not matter what someone looked like. What mattered was how they treated others. Marcus stood up. His legs felt shaky, but he walked toward the back of the ship. Other passengers whispered as he passed. The flight crew watched him with suspicious eyes. "Excuse me," Marcus said to the Draconin. "I could not help but notice you are having trouble with your seat." The dragon looked down at him. Up close, Marcus could see more scars. There was a deep cut across the alien's snout. Burns covered his neck and arms. This creature had seen real combat. "Yes," the dragon said simply. "I am too large for these seats." Marcus took a deep breath. "I have a first-class pod. It is much bigger. Would you like to trade seats with me?" The ship became quiet. Everyone stopped talking to listen. The dragon's eyes went wide with surprise. The flight crew looked shocked. "You would do this?" the dragon asked. "We have never met." Marcus nodded. "It is the right thing to do. Besides, you look like you have earned some comfort." The dragon stared at Marcus for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the first smile Marcus had seen on any face since boarding the ship. "I am General Thexkar Ironscale," the dragon said, "and you, young human, have just surprised an old warrior." General Thexkar Ironscale could not believe what he was hearing. In his 200 years of life, very few beings had shown him real kindness. Most people either feared him or wanted something from him. But this young human was offering to give up luxury for nothing in return. "Why would you do this?" the general asked. "You do not know me." Marcus shrugged. "You are a veteran. I can see the battle scars. My grandfather fought in the Hegemony Wars. He told me stories about the Draconin units that saved human colonies." The general's eyes softened. Not many people remembered those battles anymore. Most preferred to forget the ugly parts of the war. "You are sure about this?" the general asked. "First-class tickets are very expensive." "It was a computer mistake anyway," Marcus replied. "I never paid for first class. Besides, you need the space more than I do." The flight attendant stepped forward. "Sir, we cannot allow passengers to trade seats without proper authorization," she said to Marcus. Marcus turned to face her. His voice was calm but firm. "Why not? We are both paying passengers. General Ironscale has a ticket, and so do I. What rule says we cannot switch?" The attendant looked confused. She called her supervisor over. The supervisor was not happy about the situation, but he could not find any rule against switching seats. "Fine," the supervisor said, "but any problems, and you both get removed from the flight." Marcus helped the general gather his small bag. As they walked toward the first-class section, other passengers whispered behind them. Marcus heard some of the comments. "That dragon should have bought the right ticket. Humans are always trying to show off. What a waste of a good seat." Marcus ignored them. The general heard them too, but his face showed no emotion. He was used to such treatment. When they reached Pod 7, the general looked amazed. The space was huge compared to economy seats. He could actually sit down without his knees hitting anything. His shoulders fit comfortably. For the first time in hours, he could relax. "This is very kind," the general said. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Marcus replied. "Just enjoy the flight." Marcus went back to the economy section and squeezed into the general's old seat. It was terrible. His knees pressed against the seat in front of him. The armrests dug into his sides. He understood now why the general had been in pain. After takeoff, the general came to visit Marcus. Other passengers stared as the huge dragon carefully moved through the narrow aisle. "I brought you something," the general said. He handed Marcus a bottle of expensive-looking liquid. "This is Draconin fire wine, very rare." "Thank you. But I cannot accept this," Marcus said. "That must be worth a lot of money." The general sat down in the aisle next to Marcus's seat. The flight crew did not like it, but they did not dare tell a Draconin general to move. "Young human, may I ask your name?" the general said. "Marcus Chen. I run a small repair shop on Frontier Station 12. "A mechanic," the general nodded with approval. "Good. Honest work. I respect those who build and fix things." They began to talk. Marcus learned that the general was traveling to the core worlds for an important meeting. The Galactic Defense Council was deciding about veteran benefits. Many alien veterans were not getting the same treatment as human veterans. "It is not fair," Marcus said. "You fought the same wars. You bled the same blood." The general looked surprised. "Most humans do not see it that way. They think the war was only about protecting human colonies." "My grandfather never talked like that," Marcus replied. "He said the Draconan Third Fleet saved his unit on Kepler Station. Without you, he would have died. I would never have been born." The general's eyes went wide. "Kepler Station? I was there. I commanded the Third Fleet." Marcus felt chills run down his spine. "You saved my grandfather? Sergeant Tom Chen, Human Engineering Corps?" "I remember him," the general said slowly. "Small human, always covered in machine oil. He fixed our damaged ship so we could keep fighting. Good man." They stared at each other in amazement. The galaxy was a huge place, but sometimes it seemed very small. "Your grandfather was brave," the general continued. "He stayed behind to repair our engines while the enemy attacked. 3 human soldiers died protecting the repair bay that day." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. His grandfather had never told him about other soldiers dying. He only talked about the Draconan friends he had made. "He spoke about you," Marcus said. "He called you the most honorable being he ever met. He said you treated human soldiers like brothers." The general nodded sadly. "War makes brothers of all who fight together. Species does not matter when death is coming." They talked for hours. Marcus told the general about his struggles to keep his repair shop open. Business was bad on the frontier. Big corporations were taking over all the contracts. Soon he might have to close down and find work somewhere else. The general told Marcus about the legal fight for veteran benefits. Many old soldiers were poor and sick. The government promised to take care of them after the war, but those promises were being forgotten. "Politicians have short memories," the general said. "They remember the parades and victory speeches. They forget the soldiers who made victory possible." Other passengers listened to their conversation. Some seemed interested in their stories. Others just wanted them to be quiet. Marcus did not care what anyone thought. As the flight continued, Marcus realized something important. This was more than just giving up a seat. He had made a friend, a real friend who understood what it meant to work hard and fight for what was right. The general seemed to feel the same way. "Marcus Chen," he said, "you remind me of your grandfather. Same good heart, same honor." Marcus smiled. "I just try to do what is right." "That," said the general, "is exactly what your grandfather would have said." News traveled fast on starships. By the next day, everyone on the Celestial Pride knew about Marcus and the general. Some passengers thought Marcus was foolish for giving up his luxury seat. Others found the story touching. But one passenger saw something more important. Zara Vell was a young journalist from Altair Prime. She had 4 eyes and blue skin, and she worked for the Galactic News Network. She was supposed to be covering a boring trade meeting, but Marcus's story was much more interesting. Zara found Marcus in the ship's cafeteria. He was eating cheap food and reading technical manuals about starship engines. She asked if she could sit with him. "Are you the human who traded seats with General Ironscale?" she asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Yes, but it was not a big deal. Anyone would have done the same thing." "Actually, they would not," Zara said. "I watched the whole thing." 47 passengers saw the general struggling with his seat. You were the only one who helped. Zara pulled out a small recording device. "May I ask you some questions? This story deserves to be told." Marcus did not want to be famous, but Zara convinced him that the story was bigger than just one kind act. She explained that many people had forgotten why the different species fought together in the war. "Humans and aliens are growing apart again," Zara said. "Stories like yours remind people what we can accomplish together." Marcus agreed to the interview, but only if Zara promised to talk about the general too. He wanted people to know about the veteran benefit problems. The interview was simple. Marcus just told the truth about what happened. He talked about his grandfather and the lessons he learned about treating all beings with respect. He also talked about the general's struggles and the unfair treatment of alien veterans. Zara published the story on the Galactic News Network that same day. The headline read, "Human Mechanic Shows True Honor by Helping Dragon Veteran." Within hours, the story was spreading across the galaxy. Meanwhile, General Ironscale was preparing for his meeting with the Galactic Defense Council. He had been fighting for veteran rights for 10 years with little success. The politicians always had excuses. No money. Too complicated. Not enough public support. But now something was different. The general's communication device was buzzing with messages. Veterans from dozens of worlds were contacting him. They had read Zara's story and wanted to help. The first message came from a retired human colonel. "General, I served under you at Kepler Station. That story about the young mechanic reminded me why I was proud to fight beside you. What can I do to help?" More messages followed. A Centauri pilot who had lost her wings in battle. A vegan engineer who was struggling to pay for medical treatment. A human marine who remembered the general saving his unit on Europa Station. All of them had read about Marcus giving up his seat. All of them remembered what it meant to fight together as brothers and sisters, regardless of species. When the Celestial Pride docked at Proxima Station, something unexpected happened. A crowd was waiting at the arrival gate. At first, Marcus thought they were there for some celebrity or politician. Then he saw the signs. "Thank you, Marcus Chen. Honor to veterans of all species. Remember Kepler Station." The crowd was not huge, but it was diverse. Humans, Draconans, Altarians, Centaurs, and other species stood together. Many wore old military uniforms. Some carried pictures of fallen comrades. Marcus felt overwhelmed. He had never wanted this kind of attention. He just tried to sneak past the crowd, but someone recognized him. "There he is!" shouted an old human woman. "That is Marcus Chen." The crowd turned toward him, but instead of pushing forward, they did something surprising. They stood at attention and saluted. Veterans from a dozen different species, all saluting a simple mechanic from the frontier. General Ironscale appeared beside Marcus. The crowd cheered when they saw him. The general raised his hand for quiet. "Friends," the general said in his deep voice, "this young human has reminded us all of something important. Honor is not about species or wealth or position. Honor is about doing what is right when no one is watching." An old Draconan veteran stepped forward. She was missing an arm and walked with a cane. "General, I fought in the Battle of Wolf 359. I remember when humans and dragons died together to save the refugee ships. This young one's actions remind me of those days." A human veteran nodded. "My son thinks the war was just about protecting Earth, but I remember. We all fought together. We all bled together. Species did not matter." Marcus finally found his voice. "I just gave up a seat," he said. "You all gave much more." The old Draconan veteran smiled. "You gave respect, young human. In these times, that is worth more than gold." The crowd began to disperse, but people kept coming up to Marcus and the general. They wanted to shake hands. They wanted to share their own war stories. They wanted to thank Marcus for reminding them of better times. Zara Vell was recording everything. She could see that this was becoming more than just a feel-good story. This was becoming a movement. Later that day, Zara's second article was published. This one had a different headline. "Simple Act of Kindness Sparks Veterans' Rights Movement." The article included pictures of the diverse crowd at the station and quotes from veterans who said Marcus's story had inspired them to speak out. The story was picked up by news networks across the galaxy. Social media was buzzing with comments and shares. Veterans groups began organizing rallies. Politicians started receiving calls from constituents. Marcus was amazed at how quickly things were moving. He called his friend Jake back on Frontier Station 12 to tell him what was happening. "Marcus, you are famous," Jake said. "Your story is all over the news out here, too. The mayor wants to give you a medal when you get back." "I do not want a medal," Marcus replied. "I just want the general to get justice for the veterans." "Well, you might get both," Jake said. "By the way, 3 companies called looking for you today. Something about repair contracts. Big ones." Marcus was confused. He had been trying to get contracts for months with no success. Now suddenly companies were interested? General Ironscale found Marcus that evening in the hotel restaurant. The general looked different. His shoulders were straighter. His eyes were brighter. He looked like a dragon who had found hope again. "My friend," the general said, "I have news. The Defense Council has agreed to an emergency session tomorrow. They want to hear my testimony immediately." "That is wonderful," Marcus said. "But why the rush?" The general smiled. "Because 40,000 beings signed a petition today demanding justice for veterans. Because news reporters are asking hard questions. Because one human mechanic reminded the galaxy what honor looks like." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "I still cannot believe this all started with switching seats." "No," the general said seriously. "This started with a young human who chose to see a fellow being in need instead of just an alien taking up space. That choice is changing everything." Marcus woke up the next morning to find his communication device flashing with messages. 17 news networks wanted interviews. 23 veterans organizations wanted to thank him, and 5 major corporations wanted to discuss business opportunities. He ignored most of them. Today was the day he was supposed to meet with Nebula Engineering Company about a repair contract for his shop. It was the real reason he had taken this expensive trip to the core worlds. His business was failing, and this contract could save it. Marcus dressed in his best clothes, which were still just clean work clothes. He took the transport to the Nebula Engineering Building in the business district of Proxima Station. The building was huge and shiny, like everything else in the core worlds. When Marcus arrived at the reception desk, the alien behind the counter looked at him strangely. "Marcus Chen?" the receptionist asked. "The Marcus Chen from the news?" "Yes, but I am here for a business meeting," Marcus replied quickly. The receptionist made a call. A few minutes later, a well-dressed human man appeared. He looked nervous and embarrassed. "Mr. Chen," the man said, "I am afraid there has been a change. Nebula Engineering was purchased by Stellar Dynamics Corporation last week. All existing contracts and negotiations have been canceled." Marcus felt his heart sink. This had been his only hope for saving his business. "I see. Thank you for letting me know." As Marcus turned to leave, the man called after him. "Mr. Chen, I am sorry about this. For what it is worth, I think what you did for that general was admirable." Marcus nodded and left the building. He stood on the street corner, not sure what to do next. He had spent most of his savings on this trip. Now he had no contract and no way to save his shop. While Marcus was dealing with his bad news, General Ironscale was having a very different experience. The Defense Council chambers were packed with reporters, veterans, and politicians. The general had testified before this same council many times over the years, usually to empty seats and board officials. Today was different. Every seat was filled. Camera crews recorded everything. The council members looked nervous and attentive. General Ironscale told his story with dignity and power. He talked about the battles he had fought alongside human soldiers. He talked about the promises made to veterans of all species. He talked about the discrimination and neglect that followed the war. But most importantly, He talked about Marcus Chen. "Yesterday, a young human mechanic reminded me why we fought," the general said. "We did not fight for glory or politics. We fought because we believed different species could live and work together in peace. This human showed me that those values are still alive." The general's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Marcus Chen had never met me before. He knew nothing about my service record or my struggles. He saw only a fellow being who needed help, and he acted without hesitation. That is the spirit we fought to defend. That is the future we died to create." A council member interrupted. "General, while this story is touching, we are here to discuss specific policy changes." The general's eyes blazed. "Counselor, you missed the point. Marcus Chen's actions have sparked more support for veterans' rights in 1 week than I have seen in 10 years. The people of this galaxy still believe in justice. The question is, do you?" The chamber erupted in applause. The council members looked uncomfortable but could not ignore the public pressure. While the general was making history at the Defense Council, Marcus was walking sadly through the station's commercial district. He stopped at a small cafe to get some food and think about his next move. As he sat eating a simple sandwich, a woman approached his table. She was tall and elegant, wearing an expensive business suit. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, and her jewelry probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you Marcus Chen?" Marcus sighed. "Yes, but if you are a reporter, I have nothing new to say." The woman smiled. "I am not a reporter. I am Catherine Voss, CEO of Stellar Dynamics Corporation." Marcus nearly choked on his sandwich. Stellar Dynamics was one of the biggest companies in the galaxy. They built everything from space stations to starships. "I was on the Celestial Pride," Catherine continued. "I saw what you did for General Ironscale." Marcus felt confused. "You were there?" "In first class." "Pod 12, Catherine said. "I watched the whole thing. I saw how the crew treated the general. I saw how other passengers ignored his suffering. And I saw you give up your comfort without expecting anything in return." She sat down across from Marcus. "I also know you came here to meet with Nebula Engineering. My company bought them out last week." "Yes," Marcus said sadly. "I heard. I guess that ends my business plans." Catherine leaned forward. "Actually, I have a different proposal. I want to hire you, but not for a small repair contract. I want you to run something much bigger." Marcus stared at her. "I think you have the wrong person. I just run a tiny shop on the frontier." "No, I have exactly the right person," Catherine replied. "Do you know what impressed me most about your actions? It was not just the kindness. It was the fact that you did not hesitate. You saw a problem and fixed it immediately. That is exactly what I need." She pulled out a data pad and showed Marcus some plans. "I want to build a new shipyard in the frontier sectors. It would employ thousands of beings from dozens of species, but I need someone to run it who understands what cooperation really means." Marcus looked at the plans. They were incredible. The shipyard would be bigger than anything in the outer systems. It would bring jobs and prosperity to struggling frontier worlds. "Why me?" Marcus asked. "You could hire anyone, people with degrees and experience." Catherine smiled. "Degrees do not teach character, Marcus. I have seen too many educated people who lack basic decency. What you did on that ship showed me something rare. You have integrity." She slid a contract across the table. "This is an offer to become Director of Frontier Operations for Stellar Dynamics. You would oversee all our activities in the outer systems. The salary is substantial." Marcus looked at the numbers and felt dizzy. It was more money than he had ever imagined making. "I need to think about this," Marcus said. "Of course," Catherine replied. "But while you think, consider this. Your actions have already started changing things. General Ironscale's testimony today was powerful because he had hope again. You gave him that hope." She stood up to leave, then turned back. "Marcus, The galaxy needs more people like you in positions of responsibility, people who make decisions based on what is right, not what is profitable. After Catherine left, Marcus sat alone with the contract. He thought about his small shop on Frontier Station 12. He thought about his dreams of building something important. He thought about his grandfather and the lessons about treating all beings with respect. Most of all, he thought about General Ironscale and all the veterans who were still fighting for justice and recognition. Marcus pulled out his communication device and called Jake back home. "Jake, how would you like to be my partner in the biggest shipyard in the frontier?" Jake's excited shouts could be heard across the cafe. Marcus smiled and signed the contract. Things were about to get very interesting. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Chenvos shipyards, watching the first starship roll out of the construction bay. The ship was beautiful, gleaming silver and blue in the light of 3 suns. But what made Marcus most proud was not how it looked. It was who had built it. The construction crew was the most diverse group he had ever seen working together. Humans welded hull plates while Draconan engineers checked the power systems. Altarian technicians worked alongside Centauri mechanics. Veteran soldiers from a dozen different species shared their expertise with young workers just starting their careers. Jake appeared beside him, wearing his new supervisor uniform. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Jake said. 6 months ago, we were worried about fixing one broken cargo hauler. Now we are launching ships that will explore new star systems. Marcus nodded. "Sometimes I still think I am dreaming." The shipyard had grown faster than anyone expected. When news spread that Marcus Chen was running a major construction facility, veterans from across the galaxy applied for jobs. They brought skills learned in wartime and a work ethic forged in battle. More importantly, they brought something else: hope. The facility was designed using what the media called the Chen Doctrine. Every species was represented in management. All workers received equal pay for equal work. Veteran status carried the same weight regardless of what planet you came from or what you looked like. "Marcus," Jake said, "the dedication ceremony is starting soon. Are you ready for your speech?" Marcus made a face. "I hate giving speeches. You know that." "Too bad," Jake grinned. "You are famous now. Famous people have to make speeches." They walked down to the main assembly area where hundreds of workers had gathered. Media crews from across the galaxy were recording the event. Government officials from dozens of worlds had come to see the new facility. At the front of the crowd stood General Ironscale, wearing his dress uniform covered with medals. Beside him stood Catherine Voss, who had become Marcus's business partner and friend. Near them were veterans who had traveled from distant worlds just to be part of this moment. Marcus took the stage and looked out at the crowd. 6 months ago, he had been unknown and struggling. Now he was supposed to inspire people across the galaxy. It still felt strange. "Friends," Marcus began, 6 months ago, I did something very simple. I gave up a comfortable seat to help someone who needed it more. I never imagined that small action would lead to all this." The crowd was quiet, listening carefully. "But I have learned something important," Marcus continued. "Change does not come from grand gestures or important speeches. Change comes from ordinary people doing the right thing when it would be easier to look away." He gestured toward the shipyard around them. "This facility exists because people chose to believe in something better. General Ironscale chose to keep fighting for justice even when it seemed hopeless. Catherine Voss chose to invest in cooperation instead of just profit. All of you chose to work together despite your differences." Marcus spotted Zaravel in the crowd. The young journalist had been documenting the shipyard's progress from the beginning. Her articles about the Chen Doctrine had inspired similar projects on other worlds. 6 months ago, Marcus continued, many people told me that different species could not work together successfully. They said the war was over, but the unity was just temporary. They were wrong. The crowd began to applaud, but Marcus raised his hand for quiet. The unity was never temporary, he said. It was just sleeping. Sometimes it takes something small to wake it up again. A shared meal, a helping hand, a comfortable seat offered to someone who needs it. In the crowd, General Ironscale wiped tears from his eyes. The Defense Council had passed the Veterans Rights Act 3 months ago, ensuring equal treatment for all soldiers, regardless of species. The general was now ambassador for Veterans Affairs, working to implement the new policies across the galaxy. Marcus's communication device buzzed with a message from his grandfather's old unit. They were watching the ceremony from their retirement home on Earth. The message simply said, "Tom would be proud." "Today we launch our first ship," Marcus said. "But more importantly, we launch a new way of thinking. This facility proves that cooperation is not just possible, it is profitable, it is practical, and it is powerful." He pointed to the gleaming starship in the construction bay. That ship was not built by humans or Draconans or Altarians. It was built by beings who chose to work together toward a common goal. The ship is strong because the people who built it are united. The crowd erupted in applause. Workers from different species hugged each other and cheered. Veterans saluted. Children who had come with their parents waved flags from their home worlds. Catherine Voss took the stage next. "6 months ago, I thought Marcus Chen was crazy," she said with a smile. "Who gives up first class to sit in economy?" But his craziness has made this company more successful than I ever imagined. She pulled out a financial report. "The Chen Voss shipyard is already profitable. We have orders for 50 ships from governments across the galaxy. But our real success is not measured in money. It is measured in the lives we have changed." The ceremony continued with speeches from government officials and veteran leaders. But the most moving moment came when the workers themselves spoke. An old Draconan welder stood up. "I fought in the war, then came home to find no one would hire me. They said I was too big, too scary, too different. This place gave me hope again." A young human engineer nodded. "My father died fighting beside Centauri soldiers on Titan Station. Working here helps me understand what he died for." A Centauri pilot who had lost her wings in battle added, "I thought my useful life was over. Marcus Chen showed me that experience and wisdom are just as valuable as physical ability." As the ceremony ended, people began touring the facility. Children stared in wonder at the massive construction bays. Veterans pointed out features of the ships and explained how different systems worked. Workers proudly showed off their projects. Marcus found himself alone with General Ironscale near the main construction bay. They watched as the first ship prepared for its maiden voyage. "My friend," the general said, "do you ever regret giving up that seat?" Marcus laughed. "General, that was the best trade I ever made. I gave up 8 hours of luxury and gained a lifetime of friendship." The general smiled. "Your grandfather would be proud. You have honored his memory." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ship's engines come online. The vessel would carry its first cargo to a colony world in the Vega system. But Marcus knew it carried something more important, proof that cooperation could work. Zaravel approached them with her recording device. "Marcus, General, one final question for my article. What do you hope people remember about this day?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I hope they remember that big changes start with small choices. Every day we all have chances to help each other or ignore each other. The choice we make shapes the world we live in." General Ironscale nodded. "I hope they remember that honor has no species. Courage has no color, and kindness has the power to change the galaxy." As the sun set over the shipyard, workers from dozens of worlds worked together to prepare the ship for launch. In the distance, more construction bays were being built to meet the demand for ships built the Chen way. Marcus watched it all and smiled. 6 months ago, he had been a struggling mechanic with a failing business. Now he was proof that one person really could make a difference. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a simple act of kindness. Sometimes giving up your seat is the first step toward changing the galaxy. The stars shined down on Chen Voss shipyards, where beings from across the galaxy worked together to build ships that would carry their shared dreams to the farthest reaches of space. And in the quiet of the evening shift, the sound of different species working in harmony was the most beautiful music in the universe.